I found out about Grandpa's funeral the way people find out about a new restaurant opening or a coworker's birthday through someone else's social media post. A blurry group photo outside a chapel. My cousins in black. A floral wreath with his name on it. A caption that read, "A beautiful goodbye to a great man. Rest easy. Grandpa." My fingers froze on the screen. I stared at it, waiting for something. A call. A message. Anything to explain why I hadn't known, why I hadn't been told, but there was nothing. No voicemail, no email. No, we're sorry, we forgot to tell you. Not even a mass text, just digital silence. It wasn't until that evening after a long shift at the firm, after I'd filed 3 client reports and fixed 2 partners' mistakes, that a single message finally came through. From my Aunt Lisa. "We figured you were too busy with work. We didn't want to bother you." Bother me. They buried the man who practically raised me and didn't want to bother me. I didn't reply. I didn't even cry. I just sat there, phone in my lap. The hum of my fridge, the only sound in my apartment. I tried to remember the last time I spoke to him. 2 months ago. He'd asked me about my job, like he always did. Called me his storm chaser because I never backed down from hard things. Said he was proud, and now he was gone. Without a goodbye. Without a chair reserved for me. Without even a name in the program. They said it was because I was too busy, that I wouldn't have come anyway, but they didn't ask. And deep down, I knew why. Because I didn't live the way they wanted. I didn't come home for every birthday or bake pies for the church social. I didn't choose a husband at 23 and settle into quiet motherhood. I chose ambition. Long hours, a high-rise apartment, and a nameplate on my office door. And for that, they decided I didn't deserve to grieve him properly. But Grandpa had always been the exception. He never made me feel like I had to choose between being a raise and being me. And now that he was gone, I felt like the last bridge back to them had been burned. Or so I thought until a knock at my door changed everything. 3 days after the funeral I hadn't been invited to. Someone buzzed my apartment at 8:17 a.m. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee, still in sweatpants, trying to convince myself to open the work laptop. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something about the tone of the building receptionist's voice on the intercom made me pause. "There's a gentleman here to see you. Says it's important. Legal matter. He's, wearing a suit. Legal matter." My stomach clenched. 1,000 possibilities rushed through my mind. Had I missed a tax notice? A lawsuit from work? An old lease issue? I opened the door to a tall man in a gray 3-piece suit, neatly pressed, with a worn leather briefcase and a face that didn't smile easily. He introduced himself with a calm nod. "Good morning. I'm Arthur Whitmore, attorney for the estate of Mr. Daniel Reyes, your grandfather. May I come in for a moment?" I stepped aside wordlessly, heart pounding. He sat on the edge of the couch, upright, precise. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope, sealed with a wax stamp. My name was written in my grandfather's unmistakable handwriting. "I was instructed to deliver this personally to you, Miss Reyes," he said. "Your grandfather requested it be given only after the funeral." I stared at the envelope. It felt heavier than it should have. Inside was a handwritten letter dated 8 months ago and a copy of a revised will. The letter began simply, "If you're reading this, then they didn't tell you, and for that, I am truly sorry." My vision blurred. He'd known. He'd expected it. The exclusion, the erasure, the attempt to cut me out not just of the goodbye, but of the memory of him entirely. But he hadn't let them. He wrote about the time we spent together, about the way I asked questions, the way I stood my ground even when it made people uncomfortable. He wrote about how proud he was not of my salary or my apartment, but of my independence. He said I reminded him of the person he always wished he had the courage to be. "I've watched them treat your strength as rebellion, your ambition as arrogance. but I've always known the truth. You are the heart of this family, even if they've forgotten how to recognize it. Tears rolled down my cheeks before I even got to the part about the will. He'd left nearly everything to me: his home, his private book collection, his shares in the family agricultural business. Quietly. Without announcement, without drama, but with full intention. Mr. Whitmore cleared his throat gently. There will be a formal reading, of course. Your family will likely not be pleased. I folded the letter and looked up. That's fine, I said. They weren't pleased with me anyway. The official reading took place in a paneled conference room downtown, polished table. Water pitchers, legal pads. Everyone showed up. Lisa, arms crossed before she even sat down. Brian, my cousin, scrolling on his phone, pretending this was just another errand. My mother, silent and stiff in a black blazer, eyes refusing to meet mine. I hadn't been in the same room with them in years. Not really. Not since I left town. Not since I stopped answering calls that only came when they wanted something. Arthur Whitmore began in his usual calm, clipped voice. Formalities first, names, legal identifiers. Then came the will. To my granddaughter, Elena Reyes. He read, I leave the full rights and ownership of my primary residence at 37 Juniper Road, my complete personal library, and my 51% stake in Reyes Agricultural Enterprises. The silence was instant and deafening. My aunt's pen clattered to the floor. Brian actually sat up. My mother blinked like she'd just come out of anesthesia. Arthur continued reading, unwavering. To the rest of my family, I leave the memories we shared, both the sweet and the bitter. May they guide you more kindly in my absence than they did in my presence. Lisa was the first to speak. There must be a mistake. A revision error. There is no mistake, Arthur said. This document was signed, witnessed, and filed 8 months ago. Daniel Reyes was of sound mind and fully aware of his decision. Brian leaned forward. She hasn't been around. She didn't even show up to the funeral. I met his eyes, steady, because I wasn't told about it. My mother finally spoke, voice brittle. Your grandfather loved us all. He didn't mean to cut us out. Arthur raised an eyebrow, then calmly pulled out a separate, sealed envelope. I was also instructed to deliver this, he said, sliding it across the table. It contains his personal message to the family. I suggest you read it before drawing conclusions. No one touched it. I stood. I didn't need to hear more. The will didn't give me power. It didn't give me revenge. It gave me something none of them ever offered acknowledgement. And the truth, no matter how inconvenient it was to everyone else. The backlash came fast and it came loud. By the time I got home that evening, I had 4 missed calls from Aunt Lisa, 2 voicemails from Brian, and 1 long text from my mother that began with, I don't know who you've become. None of them asked how I was. None of them mentioned the letter Grandpa had left them. It was all about what I took. Lisa's voicemail started civil. Elena, sweetheart, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We should talk. I'm sure this wasn't what your grandfather intended, but by the second message, her tone cracked. You think this is fair after everything we've done for him? For you, Brian's was shorter. You're not the only one with Reyes blood. Don't forget that. And Mom, she wrote, you shut us out for years. This is the consequence. Don't pretend to be the victim when you made yourself a stranger. I didn't respond. They hadn't seen Grandpa in his last few months like I had. He called me sometimes, late at night, just to hear about my day. He told me about his garden, about how Brian never came around unless he needed something for his startup pitch, how Lisa insisted on managing his medical appointments but never actually listened to his preferences. He said Mom barely spoke to him anymore unless it was through guilt or obligation. But none of that was in the will. He hadn't weaponized their failures. He'd just left quietly. and placed his legacy in the hands of the one person who never asked to carry it. It wasn't about money, not to me, not to him. It was about choice, and still, I felt the weight of their resentment, like heat on the back of my neck everywhere I went. I heard from a distant cousin that Lisa had already contacted a lawyer, that they were preparing to contest the will, say I manipulated him. I expected it. I prepared for it, but then the call came. My grandmother, she hadn't said a word during the reading, hadn't looked at anyone, not even me, but now her voice came through the line, soft and steady. "Elena, can you come by the house?" "Of course," I said. "There's something your grandfather left for you. Something I think he wanted you to have in person." Something shifted in her voice. Less tension, more truth. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew one thing. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The old house on Juniper Road felt different without him. Still, quiet. But not in a peaceful way, like something important had been removed from its center. I hadn't been there since before his health started to decline. The gate still squeaked. The wind still caught in the same warped screen door. My grandmother opened it slowly. She looked smaller than I remembered, thinner, like time had hollowed her out in places that grief had only recently discovered. "I'm glad you came," she said softly, stepping aside to let me in. Her voice was tired, but not cold. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. She led me upstairs to his study, the same room where he taught me how to read when I was 5, where he fixed watches on rainy afternoons, where he told me once, "Books are quieter than people, and usually much wiser." The room smelled like cedar and ink and a faint trace of the aftershave he'd always worn. He told me, if anything happened to him, "I was to give you this myself," she said, reaching beneath the old roll-top desk. With both hands, she lifted a small wooden chest worn at the corners. Brass latch nearly rusted through. She set it down in front of me and stepped back. I never opened it. He said it wasn't for me. Inside were notebooks, dozens of them, leather-bound, hand-labeled, stacked with meticulous care. I lifted the first one. On the cover, in his handwriting, "For Elena, the lessons they never let me teach." I felt my throat tighten. Each page was a mix of journal entries, diagrams, drawings, personal reflections, not about business or farming, but about me, about life, about ethics, resilience, failure, and faith. Some pages were full of philosophical quotes. Others were letters he never sent. Thoughts on family, on legacy, on regret. One passage read, "Elena has something the others never understood. Conviction. Not stubbornness. Conviction. She does not yield to be liked. She holds her line, even when it costs her comfort. One day, they'll call it cold, but I know it for what it is. Integrity." I had to stop reading. Tears blurred the ink. There were photos. 2 of us in the garden, of me in a science fair when I was 10, of him smiling beside a homemade grandpa's #1 fan mug I made in 3rd grade. In the very bottom of the chest was a small velvet pouch. Inside the old compass he used to carry every time we went hiking. He once told me, "This always points north, even when I don't." And now it was mine. I turned to my grandmother. She was watching me not with jealousy or sadness, but a quiet reverence. "He loved you in a way none of them ever let him say out loud," she whispered. "And now you know." And I did. I didn't go back to the city right away. Instead, I stayed. I walked the fields behind Grandpa's house, traced the outlines of the vineyard he started from nothing, and read more of his notebooks by the window seat where he used to drink his morning tea. The land wasn't just property. It was memory. It was intention. And somewhere between those journal entries and silent mornings, I realized I didn't want to sell it. Everyone expected me to. Of course. I heard from Lisa's attorney that they were preparing a public challenge. She doesn't even live here. She's going to flip it for profit. She's too corporate to understand what this place means. They were wrong. I decided to do what Grandpa would have done, but with my own fire. I retained a local environmental firm to evaluate how the land could be converted into a sustainable agriculture research site. Then I partnered with a nearby university to offer paid internships and hands-on learning for low-income STEM students. I renamed the vineyard Compass Grove after the one object Grandpa left me to remember him by. The business press called it a strange pivot for a rising consultant. My firm back in the city offered me a leave of absence. Some colleagues called me idealistic, others brave. But I wasn't looking for applause. I was looking for alignment. Because this wasn't about proving anything to my family. It was about honoring the one person who saw through the noise, who left me the tools not just to survive, but to build something that mattered. The community began to take notice. Farmers I didn't know shook my hand. Former students from Grandpa's teaching days sent letters, thanking me for continuing his spirit. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a dusty old reporter from the local newspaper ran a story, "Estranged granddaughter returns, revives her grandfather's vision." My phone lit up with family members I hadn't heard from in years. I didn't answer, not out of spite, but because for once, I was building something that didn't need their permission or approval. It was supposed to be a quick stop, a community agriculture fair held on the high school football field. I'd been invited to speak briefly about Compass Grove and the scholarship fund. Nothing fancy, just a booth, a few questions, a short speech under a pop-up tent. But midway through the event, an older woman approached me with a warm smile and a badge clipped to her blouse. Marcy Bennett, Sunset Hills Funeral Home. "I wasn't sure that was really you," she said, shaking my hand gently. "I coordinated your grandfather's service." I swallowed hard. "You did." She nodded. Lovely man. We spoke often in his final weeks, very detail-oriented, very particular, especially about his guest list. She laughed lightly. "Made me promise to reserve a front row seat for you." I stared at her, my breath catching. "I'm sorry." He insisted on it. Marcy said you were his heart. Even if things were tense with the family, we held your seat with your name on it. When you didn't come, I figured something serious had happened. I blinked, stunned. No one told me. They said I was too busy. Marcy's smile faltered. "Oh, sweetheart." She reached into her folder and pulled out a printed seating chart. There it was, Elena Reyes, front row, left side. He hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't excluded me. The realization hit like a delayed slap. It wasn't just oversight. It was deliberate, calculated. They'd stolen my goodbye, taken away the moment he'd prepared just for me. And for what controls spite. I stood there, holding the seating chart, heart pounding like I was standing in that chapel all over again. Marcy placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Whatever they told you, he wanted you there. That's the only truth that matters." And somehow, that was enough. Not to fix the hurt, not to erase what they did, but to remind me that he knew, that in the end, he made space for me even if they didn't let me take it. I went back to the cemetery alone. No funeral crowd, no flowers, no whispers, just me, the wind, and the sound of leaves shifting overhead. The afternoon sun broke through patches of cloud as I stepped carefully between the headstones, his compass tucked safely in my coat pocket. His grave was modest by choice, no marble monument or grand epitaph, just a simple inscription carved into stone, "Daniel Reyes Farmer, father, friend." I knelt beside it, brushing away a leaf that had landed near his name. In my other hand, I held one of his notebooks, my favorite, the one filled with handwritten quotes and reflections on integrity. I flipped to the last page. "They may not remember the noise, Elena, but they'll remember what you built." I smiled through the tightness in my throat. For so long, I'd felt like I had to prove something to a family who never saw me, to a community that only whispered my name in judgment. But now, standing there with the weight of his legacy resting not on my shoulders, but in my hands, I realized I didn't have to prove anything. I had already become the woman he believed I could be. I laid the notebook gently at the base of the stone and whispered, "Thank you for everything, for never needing me to shrink." Then, slowly, I took out the compass, opened it, and let it rest against the warm granite. It pointed north, just like it always had. As I stood and turned to leave, a breeze lifted through the tree's light, unbothered, sure of itself, and for the first time in years, I felt the same.